Today, I am going to explain a crime drama movie released in 2020, named, I'm Your Woman. Before going to storyline, make sure to subscribe our channel. The movie starts with a woman, named, Jean. She is married with a boy named, Eddie, a professional thief, and living a suburban life. Despite their desire to start a family, Jean mentions that they were unable to have children. But one day, Eddie shows up with a baby, claiming that it's theirs. Intrigued, Jean asks what the baby's name is, and is told by Eddie that the name is up to her. It soon becomes evident that Eddie has connections to some shady, criminal underworld activities, and the next day he leaves from home with his friends. In the middle of the night, there is a loud knocking at the door, which wakes up Jean. To her surprise, it was Jimmy, one of Eddie's friends, who urgently tells her that they needed to leave right away, without any time to gather her belongings. Quickly grabbing her baby, Harry, she steps outside, and is picked up by California. They spend the night in a hotel, where Cal explains his role of ensuring her safety. He informs her that Eddie is nowhere to be found and that there are individuals searching for both of them. One night, Harry has a raging fever and Jean insists on taking him to a hospital. Despite Cal's fervent objections that they can't talk to anyone, they seek medical assistance for the infant and promptly depart without a proper checkout. They spend the night in their vehicle and are jolted awake the following morning by a dubious police officer who insists that Cal is causing trouble to Jean. However, Jean manages to fabricate a plausible excuse that convinces the officer to depart. She surprises herself with her innate ability to lie convincingly. Cal takes Jean to a newly established home. In case of emergency, he leaves one phone number for her to call, and tells her not to speak to anyone. She doesn't want him to leave her alone, but Cal tells her they have to do the best they can. Jean settles in, living alone and speaking to no one until she meets her neighbor Evelyn. Evelyn greets Jean with a bouquet of flowers and informs her that her friends once lived in the house. Jean introduces herself as married to her new neighbor. One night, Jean found herself feeling lonely and filled with anger. In a fit of frustration, she throws eggs at the kitchen wall. However, her mood changed when Evelyn arrives with a delicious home-cooked meal and a bottle of wine. Jean is grateful for the food and company, and welcomes her friend inside. When Evelyn asks for the location of the bathroom, Jean became suspicious, since Evelyn had previously stated that she had friends who used to live there. Evelyn chuckled and jokingly attributed the slip-up to her age. After a moment's hesitation, Jean let her suspicions go, and enjoys the evening with her friend. Later on, Jean descends to the ground floor and discovers that the front door is opened, accompanied by suspicious noises. In response, she swiftly grabs Harry and seeks refuge in a nearby closet. From there, she dials the number that Cal had left her, but there is no response. Undeterred, Jean decides to escape through the back window and make her way to Evelyn's house. Upon arriving, she is greeted by a shocking sight: two armed men who have taken Evelyn hostage, with her hands tied and mouth muffled. The men are convinced that Jean knows the whereabouts of Eddie, and demand that she reveals this information. Just as the situation seems hopeless, Cal arrives on the scene and shoots the two men, effectively saving Jean. However, in a twist of events, Cal then proceeds to turn his gun on Evelyn and shoot her as well. Jean is shocked, asserting that Evelyn was not at fault, but Cal argues that she was doomed the moment Jean opened the door for her. Cal regrets his actions, but admits that he had no other choice. During a pause to obtain formula, as Jean is unable to nurse, she confides in Cal about her past. Jean had faced infertility and suffered multiple miscarriages, ultimately accepting her fate. However, one day, Eddie returned with a baby, gifted to him by a young woman who was facing rejection from her own family due to her pregnancy. Although Jean longed for a child, she grappled with the idea of bringing a baby into such a harsh world. Cal brings Jean to his family's cabin, where he shares with her that he used to work for Eddie. He reveals that on the night they left, Eddie murdered their boss. The boss's henchmen later retaliated and took Jimmy's life. Despite Jean's belief that Eddie would never commit another murder, Cal informs her that Eddie has a long history of being a killer. To ease Jean's worries, Cal swears on his life that he has no idea where Eddie is hiding. Jean, feeling scared and alone, starts to lead a secluded existence at the cabin. The next day, when a car arrives, Jean quickly retreats to a secret hiding spot in the floor as instructed by Cal, but it's just Cal's relatives, his wife Terry, father Art, and son Paul. They all gather at the cabin and settle in. Art teaches Jean how to handle a firearm, which terrifies her. She turns to Terry for comfort, who reveals that they had been stalked by unknown men for a few nights and were forced to flee, warning Jean to be prepared for what may come. Through her deduction, Jean realizes that Terry was previously married to Eddie, something she was previously unaware of. Cal was expected to arrive soon with his family, but there has been no sign of him. Terry had made a secret plan to leave in the dead of night to track him down, but Jean intervenes and insists on accompanying her to find their husbands and uncover the truth. Terry hands Jean a firearm for protection. The two women then go to a nightclub, where Terry is supposed to meet with Mike. While there, Jean overhears someone at the club alleging that Terry stole Eddie's entire life, prompting Jean to confront Terry about Paul being Eddie's son. However, Terry states that they need to depart immediately. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire filled the air. Terry quickly placed Jean into a nearby phone booth, instructing her to stay there. However, as the shooter entered the back room and continued their attack, Jean took the opportunity to flee the club. Disoriented and lost, Jean roamed the city throughout the night. The following day, eventually, she stumbled upon a laundromat where she broke down in tears. After that, following a tip from Terry, Jean made her way to a hotel where she was finally reunited with her friend. Terry explained that Mike and Eddie used to be partners until Eddie committed a violent act, shooting off Mike's ear. Terry informs Jean about the relationship she and Eddie had with Paul, and how she wished to depart, but Eddie constantly promised that the next task would be their final one, only for it to never come to fruition. She divulges that she turned to Cal, a level-headed employee of Eddie, for comfort, and they eventually fell in love. They were attempting to hide from Eddie when they sought refuge at the hotel. However, Eddie found them and struck a deal. Terry and Cal could be together and leave their line of work, but Eddie would eventually call for Cal's assistance, a request he couldn't deny, to save Jean. Paul believes that Cal is his biological father. Terry explains that they both now have conventional jobs and believed they had escaped until the fateful call came. Terry eagerly anticipates her reunion with Mike, in the hope that Cal will be informed of her presence in the city and track them down. Suddenly, her phone rings and she recognizes Cal's voice. Without delay, Terry and Mike set off to meet Cal, but their exit is blocked by a group of men. In order to protect Jean, Terry quickly escorts her out the back door and instructs her to proceed to their predetermined meeting place. Jean embraces Terry before setting off, and Terry implores her to keep moving forward no matter what she hears. Sadly, Jean soon hears the sound of gunfire echoing in the distance. Jean meets Cal at restaurant, who breaks the news to her that Eddie has passed away. As she inspects his body, she realizes he was shot in the side. Terry soon shows up and embraces Cal with a kiss. The three of them then embark on a drive, but their unease grows as they spot Mike's men at the hotel. Jean finds it peculiar that they are being targeted even though Eddie is gone, but Cal believes that Mike is unaware of the situation. Suddenly, a car rams into them and a high-speed pursuit ensues. The chase ends when the car crashes into them head-on, leaving Cal and Terry unconscious. Mike then forcibly removes Jean from the wreckage and abducts her at gunpoint. Mike's temper flares as he ruthlessly shoots one of his own accomplices for speaking too much. He furiously inquires about Eddie's whereabouts, and Jean breaks the news that he has passed away. Mike warns her not to deceive him, but Jean doesn't hesitate and pulls the trigger, taking Mike out. She drives back to where Cal and Terry are located and is relieved to find that they are still alive. Jean and Terry, who is injured, remove the bodies of Mike and his henchmen from the vehicle and clean the guns, leaving them with the corpses. They lift Cal and place him in the car before Jean drives them back to the cabin. Upon their arrival, Jean sees a vehicle and a deceased man lying in front of the cabin. Terry, who is struggling with her wounds, hands Jean her firearm, and Jean cautiously enters the cabin to investigate. Inside, she comes across two more dead bodies, including Art, who has met his demise. She descends to the hidden space beneath the floor and finds Paul and Harry unharmed. Jean instructs Paul to close his eyes and guides him out of the cabin. They escape in the car and Jean drives them to freedom.